Okay, just a little short, don't want to get too bogged down in the history, but a little short video on lead in drinking water. It's been clarified a little bit, but I know when the shit hit the fan in Flint, Michigan, it was often presented in a way where it sounded like the lead was in the drinking water. The lead's not in the drinking water, it's in the pipes. Back in the day, we, well, go all the way back to Roman times. The Romans used lead for water pipes. They learned that lead could have an effect on people and cause them problems. It was slowly toxic. They kind of understood the chronic exposure. The word plumbing, and I know Pittsburgh accent, it's spelled plumbing, comes from the Latin word plumbum, which is Latin for lead. So that's where the whole piping industry, for water piping got its name. And, from the time they got past making pipes out of hollowed out logs, which actually was a thing, you can see examples in museums in a couple of spots, they went to iron pipes and lead service lines. Lead's nice and malleable. And if you look back in like historical literature from the time as water treatment was coming online in the early 1900s, they were still debating the use of this, but they were finding other materials that they had. Copper was expensive as shit, and iron pipes rotted out. Some old homes have galvanized iron pipe, which is basically galvanizing is a zinc coating, a little more complicated that, but basically it's a zinc coating to protect the outside of the pipe, but the inside's still iron, and people would have things that would actually rust out on them. But lead was a common thing, and but they decided for the sake of the just the economics, it was soft. If you buried it under the road and it got ran over by a lot of traffic, it would bend and squash. It tended not to crack and leak like a lot of other materials from freezing and thawing and vehicular traffic and everything else. They had more problems with other materials. Plus, like I said, iron would just rot out over time, so they stuck with lead. They were more worried about the the profits of the water producing agency, be it private or municipal, and a lot of these in the early days were private. Whether or not these things should be privately owned utilities is the whole debate for another day. But these are private for-profit companies, and they weighed the risks and decided to go with the lead. Lead is something that builds up in your body from chronic exposure. It's not like you can put you can pour water into a cup made out of lead and drink it. Not going to hurt you. You do that every day for a year, might start having a little bit more of an effect. So it's kind of one of those things it doesn't have an immediate cause and effect. It's not like you come in contact with lead today, you're gonna have a problem tomorrow. It's more like you have contact with lead for a lot of days in a row, and it slowly accumulates in your system and causes problems. And but they thought they could control it with water chemistry. And basically, the more acidic the water is, the more it wants to leach any kind of metal. The faster it would corrode, even copper, which is pretty non-corrosive. You know, if it's acidic enough, it's going to dissolve copper. It'll be slow over time because, you know, water's not really that strong of an acid. You know, nobody's drinking water that's, you know, as acidic as even like a mild acid like vinegar. So, you know what I mean? But within that little range, they want to keep it towards the alkali side. You want to have a pH above 7. And they also usually kind of kill two birds with one stone. They made the water hard. Hardness is actually basically the calcium content of the water. It's lime, like ground up limestone lime. They add lime to the water and it raises the pH and it tends to coat the inside of the pipe. And over the years they've gotten into, you know, other chemicals that will also raise the pH and or coat the inside of the pipes, and that's the way they were solving the lead problem. That's why in Flint, Michigan, when they changed water sources, it wasn't that the lead was in the water chemistry changed and leached the lead out of the old lead pipes. And basically, if your house was built before World War II, you probably had a lead service line going to it. It may have been replaced since then, but that's roughly the dividing point. And it varied a little bit in different localities. I know here in Pittsburgh, if it was built up to World War II, chances are lead is what they put in originally. If it was built after World War II, they were already switching over to copper. And, you know, the technology costs, everything else kind of affected it, as well as just the knowledge of copper being, lead being a problem. Also, back in the day when they first were putting in ductile iron water mains, they didn't have good gasket technology until basically World War II or after. And before you had these, you know, these nice, you know, bell and spigot end pipes with these little gaskets already in there, this nice, you know, rubber gasket or O-ring to kind of pop it together and seal it up real nice. They still had sort of the bell and plain end, and you'd stick the pipe into the bell, and then you'd go around. It's just funny, you'll see it on old drawings and that, where, you know, they list the materials, and they'll call for hemp and lead. And what they did is they got hemp rope, like twine, and they would pack it in there around the pipe. That's how they used to seal up ships back in the old sailing days too. They'd actually basically jam twine in between the boards, and then they'd tar it. But in this case, they jam that hemp up in there like a gasket. They just, you know, wind rope around it and keep on jamming it in there, and then they'd seal around the outside of it with lead solder. Theoretically, the rope should be, you know, sealing the water from ever getting out to where the lead is, but it's there in the oldest of the old water mains. A lot of these, you know, they got a useful life of 50 years and they've been in there for 150. That's why we've got geysers in our streets far more often than we should. But these lead water lines are out there. You might have lead actually in the walls of your house. You know, it was commonly used, and you know, there wasn't that much. It depended on who built your house. A lot of these things were built better and with more craftsmanship back in the day. Then again, people half-assed things back then too. So that's the thing, you know, the lead's not out there in the public domain owned by the utility. The lead, the biggest bulk of it, is actually between that water main in the water meter, or in some cases even in between the walls. Now, up until, off the top of my head, I just was reading about this not too long ago, I believe it's 1986, even the copper pipe in people's houses, they were using lead solder. Actually, it was 50% tin, 50% lead, and that's what they soldered all the joints in the pipe. So you had lead in your copper pipes on up until at least the mid 80s. On top of that, a lot of your alloys have trace amounts of lead. Even the ore coming out of the ground's not totally pure, and yeah, some stuff comes off with the slag, but a lot of times your alloys aren't 100% pure. Theoretically, your copper pipe is pure copper. That copper pipe might have a little bit of lead mixed in with it. It's just that there's these traces of other foreign things in there. And it wasn't until, I want to say 2011, when they made harsher regulations on how much lead could be alloyed in with other metals. I believe you have to be less than 0.25% lead to be considered lead free. So some of these things were, a couple of percentage points lead in, things that were cast for your water fixtures and things like that. So there's a lot of these little places where lead's hiding in the system, even if you have copper pipes. And that understanding maybe could go a long way to help people, because just, you're looking at it as being something outside your house that's coming in, and it's actually, the vast majority of it is inside your house, leaching out of your own pipes. You can use a filter. Sometimes using a whole house filtration system doesn't work, though, if there's lead in your pipes that are after the filter. But just in general, just cleaning up some of the plumbing in your own house, getting rid of some of the old fixtures and things like that may go a long way to help reduce the lead that you would have in your system. There's still going to be some trace amount out there on the public side. There was trace amounts of lead in a lot of the valves and fittings and whatever in the water system, but in general, like modern water pipe has rubber gaskets. It's made out of what they call ductile iron. It's a little bit different, stronger version of cast iron, for lack of a better way of explaining it. And they're normally lined with I want to say concrete, not concrete, but like Portland cement. They after these things are made, they like run cement, like Portland cement, on the inside, and they spin it, and it puts a coating on the inside, so the metal itself shouldn't have any contact with the water. They do that to protect the pipe from corrosion, but it also protects you from anything that would be in the pipe. So your water, if it's all new pipe, it should only be coming in contact with Portland cement and rubber gaskets, for the most part, and a little bit of ductile iron here and there on an occasional exposed surface. And but still, like I said, a lot of these systems around here, especially the older cities, they've got issues. A lot of it's on the private side. So, if you live in an older house, even if it's not quite as old, you might not be as safe as you think. Just, look into what kind of piping you've got. I know there's a lead replacement program in Pittsburgh. There's a lot of them around the country, but, that's still not getting the lead out of your walls and out of your old fixtures. And, other than that's, and understanding the chemistry. That's why you get the white buildup on your shower head and things like that. You get that white little bit of hardness. That's because they put the lime and the hardness in there to kind of counteract that and try to keep the lead from leaching out of your pipes. But, hopefully that clarifies things a little bit for some of the people that, aren't as familiar with how things are put together, and hope it helps.